What's up, ladies and gents? Today we are going to talk about social justice, particularly in the gaming industry. Does it belong there? Why is it important? Is math related to science? If that last one was actually a question, then you're beyond my help, sadly. Obviously, this topic has a lot of controversy surrounding it, so if you disagree with any of the things that I'm saying, I would ask that you please just be respectful and listen to what I have to say. Or you can call me a dirty fascist in the comments. It's up to you. If you are young enough that you will not understand the big boy words that I'm going to use in this video, I don't know what you're even doing here or why you even care about this. Have a childhood. Go throw firecrackers at ants or do something productive. Build Legos. I don't know. What are you doing here? Why do you even care? Now that you more or less understand what's going to be in this video, let's dive right into it. So let's talk about how big the gaming industry actually is and how much it produces as far as wealth and power goes. So the estimated revenue for the gaming industry in 2015 was $91.5 billion. That is a lot of money. The current record for global revenue over a 5-day period for books, video games, and movies, of course, goes to a video game. It is currently held by Call of Duty Black Ops at $650 million. Now, with great wealth comes great power, and with great power comes great responsibility. At least that's what social justice warriors think when they want games to be more diverse. As far as the realms of political correctness go, we're going to be mostly analyzing race and gender, and what effect they have, if any, on the gaming experience. We're going to start off talking about racial diversity in gaming, and the most recent example, which would be Battlefield 1. Now, a lot of people complained that this game was a little too diverse, and that there were too many black characters running around, and that it made the game seem historically inaccurate. If you know anything about World War I, then you know that there were, in fact, black soldiers on all sides fighting in this war. You would also know that it was definitely not the majority of soldiers. For people that wanted the game to be as real and true to World War I as possible, this was kind of a turnoff. However, if you're willing to complain about the diversity of the game, and then you have nothing to say about the fact that everyone's running around with a machine gun, and it's World War I, and that didn't happen, then your logic is kind of flawed. There's two sides to the argument that says that there should be more black soldiers running around. The first is the side that wants to be a black soldier shooting more white people, and the second is the KKK members that want to shoot more black characters. And then you have the people in the middle, like me, who really just don't give a fuck. Before we dive any further into this, let's talk about the previous installments in the Battlefield series. You had Battlefield 3, where the assault class was originally a white male, and then after an update, he was made black. For some, it was an unnecessary change. The game was perfect just the way it was. Honestly, I thought the game was great when it first came out. But for social justice, it was a big step in the right direction. Honestly, that made more sense than Battlefield 1 does, because there's actually a lot of black Marines currently serving in the Marine Corps. And then you had Battlefield 4, where none of the characters were black, except for one of the characters in the single-player campaign. There was hardly any complaints about that, and Battlefield 4 still turned out to be a really good game, which begs the question, why did it even matter in the first place? People will go out of their way to tell you that the Battlefield franchise is the most immersive war experience that there is to date. But I disagree with that, because I don't think that a person carrying an M240 Bravo medium machine gun and a mortar system can run just as fast and just as long as somebody carrying an M4 and a couple grenades. Does Battlefield have things about it that are realistic? Sure. But the game is not out to be as realistic as possible, because if it was, you would have to do hot barrel changes on all of the machine guns, which would be annoying and stupid. Going back to World War I, rations were so low that troops were only allowed to fire a certain amount of shots per day. So if you went through an entire game in Battlefield 1 and only fired 4 shots out of a bolt-action rifle, which is normally what you would have in World War I, you would never play that game again because you would be bored out of your mind. So the argument that too many black soldiers makes the game historically inaccurate is kind of stupid. That being said, the game would have been perfectly fine if all of the soldiers were white. It doesn't really matter what color their skin is, because they're on the enemy team. You're going to kill them regardless. I have no problem with the fact that there's black soldiers running around in Battlefield 1, but what I don't understand is why they're only snipers. And it's the same character model. On all the different teams, it's the same black character model. Except for on the Ottoman team. Because, you know, that wouldn't have been accurate. It just seems kind of lazy to me. Let's talk about Star Wars The Force Awakens for a second, particularly the character of Finn. Everybody was kind of surprised at the fact that there was a black stormtrooper in that movie. However, he was a very likable character, and the color of his skin had nothing to do with the role he was playing. Even more recently, we have Far Cry 5, which puts you in the state of Montana, quote-unquote, killing white Christian males. First of all, nobody said that they were Christians. They could be branching off of Jewish beliefs or even Islam. We don't know anything about their religion because the game hasn't come out yet. You're just assuming that they're Christian because they're white. Second of all, if you've been to Montana, then you know there's pretty much nothing here but white people. The state is not very diverse. Trust me, I live here. But let's talk about something that wasn't controversial. Watch Dogs 2. The main protagonist of that game, Marcus, was from Oakland, which is not very far from San Francisco, which is a heavily Asian-populated area. And that wasn't a big deal, because I can work with that. Oakland isn't that far from San Francisco. Then you have Grand Theft Auto 5, which is set in a state called San Andreas, in a city called Los Santos, and none of the main characters were Hispanic. What? That doesn't make any sense to a lot of people, but it wasn't a big deal, for a very simple reason. We were fine with the characters that we got. There didn't need to be any racial ethnicity or racial diversity among the characters. They were fine, and they worked well with the story. On top of that, Mexicans didn't cry for a Mexican protagonist because we don't get offended by stupid shit. Let's move on to the topic of genders. Battlefield did fall into a trap of social justice, but not in the same way that Call of Duty World War II has, which will feature playable female soldiers on the battlefield. For a game that brags about having a historian on board to make the game historically accurate, putting female soldiers on the battlefield in World War II does not make any sense whatsoever. The option to play as a female came into Call of Duty when Call of Duty Ghosts came out. I remember it being in the multiplayer reveal trailer, and when I saw it, it was supposed to be this big reveal, but I just kind of went, meh. It was just kind of like, yeah, congratulations, you're gonna have female playable characters. Good, that's a good thing, but why is it such a big deal? They were trying to make it this big thing, but the fact that they bragged about it made it more obvious that they were doing it just as a political stunt. Nobody was really against it, but the fact that they were cramming it down our throats was just kind of annoying. But whatever, it wasn't a big deal. The game was set in a modern time, and in our modern time, we live in an age of political correctness. So, cool, there was going to be female playable characters in Call of Duty. I wasn't going to play as one because I'm not a female, so it didn't matter to me. But then we get to World War II, where they're bragging about the game being historically accurate and then putting females on the battlefield. It doesn't make sense to me. It's not like anyone would have been, oh man, Call of Duty World War II doesn't have females in multiplayer? Wow, that game sucks, I'm not gonna buy it. But of course, the developers have to make it seem like they're all for social progression so that nobody gets mad at them and hurts their feelings. Let's take a trip into gaming's history for a second. In popular games like Super Mario Bros. And The Legend of Zelda, you played as the lone hero that went on this grand adventure to save the princess from the castle. And then feminism came around and they said, no, the princess can take care of herself. And that's fine, you can think that, but I don't really see Princess Peach standing up to a fire-breathing giant turtle monster. Come to think of it, I don't see Mario doing it either, but you get my point. Now let's go back to talking about Star Wars for a second. The most recent installments we've seen in the Star Wars universe have been Star Wars The Force Awakens, Star Wars Rogue One, and then now we have Star Wars Battlefront 2 coming out. All three of those things have a female protagonist. This kind of worked in The Force Awakens. It was refreshing to see a female protagonist that was, doing badass things and kicking ass on screen, but where was the depth to her character? We don't know anything about her except that we don't know who her parents are. We don't know who Finn's parents are either. Or do we just not care because he's a man? Or do we just not know who his parents are because, he's a stormtrooper? It's as if they were so wrapped up in having a female protagonist on screen that was kicking ass that they forgot to add depth to her character. Star Wars isn't necessarily just an action movie where Arnold Schwarzenegger comes out, says a one-liner, does something cool, and you're like, oh wow, this is awesome. That's not what Rey was supposed to be. They were supposed to make you care about her. At least I think they were. The only interesting thing about her was that we didn't know who her parents were, and we would fantasize, oh, maybe it's Obi-Wan Kenobi, oh, maybe it's Luke Skywalker. But what about how she grew up? Did she have any father figures or parents when she was in the desert by herself, or was she just kind of on her own the whole time? How did she get food as a child? Like, Was she a slave the whole time? How did she work? What happened? These are all questions that I want answers to, but I don't get any answers to them. Finn, we got answers to most of our questions about him. He was raised to do one thing, like he said in the trailers, that he was a stormtrooper since birth. But what about Rey? I don't know anything about her. Why is she interesting to me? I don't understand. It didn't work for me at all with Rogue One, because the main protagonist, although Felicity Jones, I think, did a good job with acting out her part, she was just bland. The character itself was just bland. There was nothing to her. We didn't know anything about her, where the conflict was, why she was the way she was. We didn't know anything. The most interesting character in that movie was K2SO. I'm gonna say that again, only more cynical this time. The most interesting character in that movie was a fucking robot. A robot was more interesting than the human protagonist in the movie. They forgot to make an interesting character. They were so wrapped up in, we're being progressive with the female protagonist and she's gonna do badass stuff. They forgot to make her interesting. I don't understand why they do this. So Battlefront 2, if you can hear me, please focus on giving me a good gaming experience rather than being progressive and just giving me a female protagonist that kind of does stuff. Just make the single player fun. That's all I care about. That's all I want from you. Now I want to talk about Battlefront, the first Battlefront, for a second, and how people made a big deal about there being female stormtroopers and whether or not there should or shouldn't be. And I want to bring up, in The Force Unleashed, the captain, an Imperial officer that was flying you around, Captain Juno Eclipse, was a woman. So, did you forget she existed, or did you just only care about it when social justice was a big thing? My point is that none of this mattered before now. Now that social justice is a big thing, all of a sudden, everything matters. And if you don't have women and black people and Jews in your game, that you're racist and you hate everyone and that nobody's going to buy your game. But that's not true. If you make a good game, people are going to play it. When gaming first started off, you would push a few buttons to move a few pixels on a screen back and forth. Now we're so far ahead that we have virtual reality headsets and virtual reality controllers that will allow you to grab things that you see with that headset. And people are more concerned about what race or gender the protagonist of the game is. Who cares? Honestly. I don't care if you're black, white, yellow, red, fucking purple. The next protagonist of the Call of Duty could be a fucking Smurf for all I care. I don't care. If they make it a good game and they make it playable and enjoyable, I'll buy it and I'll play it. So I did a little research and I wanted to find out what the top 5 most iconic video game characters of all time were, and I wanted to analyze what their race, what their gender was, and then see how popular those games were and how well they were made. What made them popular, essentially. So, number 5 on the list, we have Link from The Legend of Zelda. And I played The Legend of Zelda a lot as a kid, specifically Ocarina of Time. And the reason that game was fun is because of how big it was. And the fact that it was the first 3D Legend of Zelda game. Like, that was huge. And on top of that, the game provided you a free roam experience, and it was challenging. The dungeons were challenging. I spent like 2 weeks trying to figure out all of the puzzles in the water temple. And honestly, it didn't matter what the protagonist looked like. He never said anything. It didn't matter. He grunted whenever I freaking swung the sword or would block something, and whenever he got hit, he would whimper like a little bitch, but that was about it. It didn't really matter. And you were off to save a princess. What more could you want from a video game? Now, Link is a white male with blonde hair and blue eyes, but we didn't know really what specific features he had until Ocarina of Time came out, when he really became 3D, because like I said, at first he was just pixels on a screen and you would just move him and you would swing your sword. So at the end of the day, it's about the user experience. The game was fun and it was groundbreaking because you could move into different areas and do different things and talk to people and gain objects like the Master Sword. It was fun. Next on the list at number 4, we have the Master Chief from the Halo franchise. Now, when Halo Combat Evolved came out, it was the shit. Like, Honestly, I would sit there all day and I would play with my brothers. Even my dad played it. Hell, even my mom played one level of Halo Combat Evolved because it was a fun game. It was like one of the first awesome first person shooter games to ever come out, and it looked great. And you would run around and you would kill aliens, and blood would just, all these colorful colors would just spill out of their bodies, and it was freaking awesome. And on top of that, if you had more than one controller, then you could play against your siblings or your friends or whatever. And I would sit on the couch with my dad and my brothers, and we would play this game all day because it was fun to melt their faces with the rocket launcher or to get freaking headshots on them with the ridiculously overpowered Magnum. It was fun. And we didn't know what race the protagonist was. All we knew was that he was a male. That was it. Now, in recent years, they have given him more of a personality, and at the legendary ending of Halo 4, they revealed that he was in fact a white male. But personally, they didn't really need to give Chief more of a personality. The more they personify him, the less compelling they make the stories for some reason. I don't understand that. Like, they give Chief more of a personality, but then the game's campaign is just not as good as it has been. Halo 1 and Halo 2 and Halo 3 were like the best single player story, honestly, that I've ever experienced, just because you were invested in the game world and the characters. Even though we didn't know anything about the Master Chief, we just knew that he kicked ass. That's what made the game awesome. Moving to number 3 on our list, we have Lauren Southern's favorite video game protagonist of all time, Sonic the Hedgehog. So that lets you know how much your genders and your races actually mean when the third most iconic video game character of all time is a blue hedgehog that runs really fast. So, honestly, again, the protagonist is not what made the game fun. Yeah, sure, Sonic is cool. They've given him somewhat of a personality and he's a cool dude. But what made Sonic fun was the fact that it added a new style of gameplay, about like just speed running across a screen. Now, granted, you did that with other games, but it was just different. The way he moved around and what he did was just different. And it wasn't necessarily, it didn't have anything to do with his race or his gender, or the fact that he was an animal. It could have been a person, and it wouldn't have made any difference to me. The fact that the game played a certain way is what made it fun, and honestly, downright addicting. Coming to number 2 on our list, we have Mario from Super Mario Bros. Now, if you played Super Mario Bros. When it originally came out on the Nintendo Entertainment System, then you know that this was like the groundbreaking game. Like, this showed the potential that the gaming industry had as far as the innovation that came with games and moving those pixels across the screen and putting in code. And it was awesome. It was awesome to play because there was so much to do and so many different areas that they made. And it was cool to see all the different things they could do. It didn't matter that Mario was a white male, or that he was Italian, or even the fact that he had a mustache. That's not what made the game interesting. What made the game interesting is that stomping Koopas and Goombas mercilessly into the ground was fun as hell. Now, moving to the number 1 spot on our list, the most iconic video game character of all time. The character that everybody and their grandmother knows. Pac-Man. The most iconic video game character of all time is a fucking yellow circle. Now, what gender is he? His name is Pac-Man, so we can assume that he's a man. What race is he? For obvious reasons, he's Japanese. Not because his skin is yellow, because he was made by a Japanese company, you freaking racist. That's not what I meant. All jokes aside, though, this game was incredibly simple, and the protagonist was incredibly simple. But it was still finding new ways to innovate. And that's what I think that everybody is missing when it comes to video games. That it's not about being progressive and about what gender and race your character is and what economic class he's in or anything like that. It's about the experience that they bring, about the innovation that your game brings. And the reason that I am playing Titanfall 2 in the background is because Titanfall 2... the Titanfall franchise is relatively new, and it's still managed to innovate the first-person shooter genre in a way, honestly, in the biggest way that I've seen in recent years. When Titanfall originally came out, it was the first to offer that insane player mobility that we have seen now in games following it for a long time. It was the first one to come out, and then Call of Duty Advanced Warfare followed it, and then Halo 5 followed it, and Call of Duty Black Ops 3. All of these games started to offer more enhanced mobility after Titanfall came out. And if you look at Titanfall, the first Titanfall barely had a single-player story, and it was pretty much all multiplayer. But the fact that it was so much fun to play, and that you would get in this giant robot and punch the shit out of other giant robots, and that you could slide, and that you could wall run and double jump, and the fact that the gunplay was really good. They offered an awesome gaming experience without the expense of anything at Social Justice. They cared about the user experience and about creating a good game more than they cared about anything else. As a matter of fact, they even didn't care about a single-player story. They cared about the gameplay. That's amazing to me. Now, if you don't believe me and you think, oh, Titanfall sucks and it didn't do anything for the gaming industry whatsoever, here's disproof of that. Titanfall took over 60 awards at E3 2013. It got 6 E3 Critics Awards: Best in Show, Best Original Game, Best Console Game, Best PC Game, Best Action Game, and Best Online Multiplayer, all from E3. And it won Best of Show from IGN, Destructoid, Game Informer, Electronic Gaming Monthly. It even got a pretty good review from Polygon, and the list goes on. Honestly, this game broke so many records. It was the #1 shooter in America for a really long time because it just found a new way to innovate. Even though it didn't have a black protagonist, it did give you the option to choose between a male and a female, but honestly, that's not really what the game... It didn't have any difference as far as gameplay goes. It barely had a single-player story, and yet it was so popular, and so many people loved it. I loved it. And it was just... It was complex in that it innovated, but it was so simple in that that's all it was trying to do. It was just trying to innovate. Now, I just realized while I was filming this that a lot of people were going to call me out for not having a female in the top 5 most iconic video game characters of all time, and that's not really the point, but I figured, I'd just bring up the most iconic female protagonist of all time. And so the first one that came up was Lara Croft. Now, why is Lara Croft popular? Gee, I wonder. It must be her stunning, juicy, and insanely well-written personality, right? Sex does sell, whether you like to think it does or it doesn't. But marketing is a completely different topic for a completely different time. The point, or the conclusion that I'm trying to come to here, is that social justice warriors are pushing video games and the video game industry to progress in the wrong direction. They're trying to push it to be more politically correct and to pander to their ideas, when in reality, video game developers need to be trying to find new ways to innovate, not in the social hemisphere, but in the gameplay hemisphere. And they need to create a better experience and focus on, hey, maybe we can have like 8K Skyrim virtual reality where it actually feels like virtual reality and is not just a headset that makes you motion sick. That's what you need to be pushing for, not whether or not your protagonist is going to be male or female. The more you get caught up in this social justice bullshit, the less you're going to be focused on creating a better experience for gamers. And I think that's the big point that everybody needs to see here, that social justice needs to just stay the hell out of gaming's way. Now, I'm not saying that race and gender and diversity in video games is a bad thing. That's not what I'm saying at all. We've seen that diversity and character creation can be a really good thing in games like Mass Effect and the Fallout franchise and the Elder Scrolls franchise, and games where you can create your character and you have all these different options and settings where you can create something that you want. And it was fun to play as Daenerys Targaryen in Dragon Age. That was pretty cool. I was like, wow, people are being really artistic with this. But what I think would go too far as political correctness and social justice goes is when I go to select my character's gender and there's 234 different options. Seriously though, what is my character going to look like after option 219? Is it going to look more masculine? Is it going to look more feminine? What genitalia is it going to have? I don't know. That would just confuse the hell out of me. Please, God, don't push for that. The point is, if social justice is going to better enhance my gameplay experience, I have yet to see it happen. Guys, thank you so much for watching and for listening. And ladies, sorry, not just guys. even if you didn't agree with the things I said. If you feel the need to go call me a womanizing, racist, fascist in the comments, please feel free to do that. If you enjoyed the video and you liked what I said, please leave a like. Or even if you hated what I said but you want to hear me ramble more, please leave a like. Subscribe if you want more videos like this. Let me know in the comments section below if you're ready for Call of Duty Smurfin' Warfare. I'm excited for it. Playing as a Smurf is definitely, going to enrich my gaming experience. I would tell you guys to peace out, but that would be very politically correct of me. So, fuck off. Have a good one, gents.